Today, we are digging into one of the most famous and frankly one of the most disturbing experiments in the history of psychology, the Milgram Obedience Study.
You know, most of us walk around with this belief. It's just a core part of who we think we are. It feels solid, it feels true. We're good people, right? We wouldn't intentionally harm someone innocent. But what if that certainty, that really comfortable belief we have about our own morality, what if it's just plain wrong? Back in 1961, a psychologist decided to put that very idea to the ultimate test. And this is what he found: 65%. Let that sink in. Nearly 2 out of every 3 ordinary people were willing to deliver what they thought was a fatal electric shock to a total stranger. Why? All because a guy in a lab coat told them to. The question we have to answer is, why?
This whole thing started because of a dangerous assumption the entire world was making right after World War II.
So picture this, it's 1946. At the Nuremberg trials, high-ranking Nazi officials used the same defense over and over again. I was just following orders. And the world, understandably, said no way. We called them monsters. We decided they were fundamentally different from the rest of us. But a young psychologist, Stanley Milgram, he had this really unsettling thought. What if they weren't different at all? What if any of us, under the right pressures, could do the same thing?
To test this haunting idea, Milgram came up with this incredibly clever and deeply deceptive experiment. Its power was built on a very carefully constructed lie.
He put out ads for regular guys from New Haven, Connecticut to take part in a study about memory. Simple enough, right? But the study had absolutely nothing to do with memory. The real experiment was about obedience, and the craziest part, the participants had no clue they were the ones actually being studied.
Okay, so here's the setup. Each volunteer was called the teacher, and they were paired with an actor who was playing the learner. A coin toss decided the roles, but, and this is key, it was rigged. The real volunteer was always the teacher. They'd watch the learner get strapped into a chair with electrodes on his wrists, and then they were taken to another room to sit in front of the shock generator. Now, this machine, it was designed to be intimidating. It had 30 switches in a row, starting at a pretty mild 15 volts, but they went all the way up to a terrifying 450 volts, which was just marked with this ominous XX. For every wrong answer the learner gave, the teacher had to flip the next switch, delivering a stronger shock. Of course, the machine was totally fake, but the teacher believed it was 100% real. And this is where the real test begins. It's that moment where the participant's own conscience starts screaming at them, but it's clashing with the calm, steady command of an authority figure. At first, it's pretty routine. But then, at 75 volts, you hear a grunt of pain from the other room. At 150, the actor starts yelling, complaining about a heart condition, demanding to be let out. By 300 volts, he's desperately pounding on the wall. And then, after the 315-volt shock, just silence. Nothing. The teacher is now shocking someone who isn't responding at all. You can imagine the teachers were sweating, they were trembling, they wanted to stop. But every time they hesitated, the researcher in the white lab coat would just calmly say one of 4 scripted lines. No threats, no yelling, just this simple, firm instruction to continue. And most of them did. So the critical question is, how far did people actually go? Before he ran the experiment, Milgram asked a bunch of psychiatrists to predict the outcome. And their predictions, well, they were wildly, dangerously wrong. They predicted that maybe 1% of people, you know, the truly sadistic fringe of society, would go all the way to 450 volts. The actual result? A jaw-dropping 65%. Nearly 2 out of every 3 ordinary people went all the way to the end of the board, shocking a silent, unresponsive stranger. So Milgram, being a good scientist, started playing with the variables to see what made a difference. Take the experiment out of prestigious Yale and move it to a rundown office building. Obedience drops to about 48%. Force the teacher to physically hold the learner's hand down on the shock plate. It drops to 30%. But here's the most telling part. What if the participant only had to read the questions while somebody else pushed the button? Compliance shot up to over 92%. Wow! Turns out, a little distance from the consequences makes things a whole lot easier.
So what in the world explains this? How can seemingly good people do this? Milgram came up with a really powerful psychological theory for how this happens.
He called it the Agentic State. It's basically this mental shift that happens when we feel like we're part of a hierarchy.
We stop seeing ourselves as individuals responsible for our own choices. Instead, we start to see ourselves as, well, as an agent, just an instrument for carrying out someone else's orders.
And this slide just illustrates that mental shift perfectly. When you're in an autonomous state, acting for yourself, you ask moral questions. Is this right? Is this wrong? But when you shift into the agentic state, the question becomes technical. Am I doing my job right? Am I following the procedure correctly? It's like the moral responsibility for the action just gets transferred to the person in charge.
And this brings us right back to that Nuremberg defense. Milgram's point was that following orders wasn't a legal excuse, but it was a powerful psychological explanation. The real horror wasn't that these were uniquely evil men. The horror was that they were ordinary men who found a way to switch off their conscience, to act without feeling that crushing weight of personal responsibility.
Okay, so this is all pretty terrifying knowledge. What do we do with it? Well, Milgram believed that just being aware of this mechanism, that's our best defense against it.
And his own experiments show us what works. Just seeing one other person refuse to go on, a dissenting peer, it just shattered the obedience. The closer you are physically to the consequences of what you're doing, the harder it is to obey. And when two authority figures disagree with each other, their power basically evaporates. In the end, taking personal responsibility is the antidote.
And that really leads to this critical habit we all need to develop: self-surveillance. It's about pausing right in the moment and asking yourself, wait, why am I really doing this? Is it because I believe it's the right thing to do? Or is it just because stopping feels weird and uncomfortable?
And the follow-up question is just as important. In my own mind, who is actually responsible for this action? Is it me? Or have I secretly, maybe without even realizing it, handed that burden over to my boss, my company, or the person giving the orders?
In the end, Milgram's study showed us a really chilling truth. The power to cause harm, or to stop it, was always in the participants' hands. The tragedy is that under the pressure of authority, they forgot they were the ones holding the switch. And that's the question this whole experiment leaves for us. In our own lives, when are we forgetting that we're the ones holding the switch?